A federal judge ordered the Trump administration to return an exhibit on slavery. It comes after workers removed that display from a historical museum in Philadelphia last month. In a lawsuit, the city claimed the government was required to consult with the city before making any changes to that exhibit at Independence National Historical Park.
Hey guys, your daily host Adam is here. All right, so this is wild. A federal judge in Pennsylvania just absolutely destroyed Trump's administration with an emergency order that went into effect immediately. And what was it about?
Well, a judge will determine whether an exhibit about slavery at Independence National Historic Park will be restored. The National Park Service removed the displays last week following an executive order by President Trump last March. The city of Philadelphia filed a lawsuit seeking to have the exhibit restored, and CBS News Philadelphia's Liz Crawford spent the day in the courtroom hearing the arguments.
8 days after slavery exhibits were removed from the president's house in Old City, Philadelphia, dozens of people packed a courtroom to hear arguments from the city of Philadelphia and the federal government.
Trump's team tried to erase slavery from a historic exhibit in Philadelphia, like literally remove displays about the enslaved people George Washington owned and replace them with more patriotic feel-good messaging. And the judge said, absolutely not. You don't get to rewrite history just because slavery makes you uncomfortable.
A federal judge just ruled on a lawsuit in the city's favor, saying this exhibit must be restored. And CBS Philadelphia's Dan Snyder is live on Independence Mall. Dan, you've got the very latest.
Yeah, good evening to you guys. You know, this historic site was in part meant to honor the enslaved people who were held here. And aside from being President's Day, that ruling came down coincidentally at a time when dozens of people had gathered here rallying to demand that these exhibits be put back up. Now, while they are celebrating today, they also tell us that they don't believe their fight is over just yet.
You don't get to sanitize America's past to make it more politically convenient. Restore the exhibit now. It's a devastating blow to Trump's culture war agenda.
It was the moment Michael Cord with the Avenging the Ancestors Coalition announced to a crowd of dozens a federal judge sided with the city of Philadelphia and ordered all exhibits that were removed from the president's house to be put back.
But better than fighting the good fight is winning the good fight. And today we won.
The judge's ruling says the site must be restored to its standing on January 21st, the day before the exhibit was removed. It came after President Trump's executive order last year titled Restoring Truth and Sanity to American History. The news also came as people with the coalition were holding a President's Day rally, calling for the panels to be restored.
So this has been a very rewarding effort, but also it's crazy that in 2026 we still have to do this. In 2026 we still have to fight for the truth.
And it shows once again that federal judges are the only thing standing between Trump and complete control over how Americans learn about their own history. Here's the background.
Welcome back. The courts once again are pushing back on the Trump administration this morning. A federal judge ruling yesterday that the Trump administration must temporarily return displays that discuss George Washington's ownership of slaves to Washington's former home in Philadelphia. The preliminary injunction comes after the city of Philadelphia sued the Interior Department and the National Park Service after they removed the displays last month.
The President's House site in Philadelphia is a National Park Service location. It's where George Washington lived when he was president. And part of the exhibit there talks about the 9 enslaved people Washington kept at that house. Real people, real stories, including stories about how some of them escaped to freedom. It's an important part of history because it shows the contradiction of America's founding. You had the first president, the guy on the dollar bill, the father of our country, and he owned human beings. That's uncomfortable. That's difficult. But it's true. For years, the exhibit has told that truth until Trump's Interior Department decided it shouldn't anymore. They went in and removed the displays about Washington's enslaved workers. They took down the panels describing who these people were and what happened to them. And they replaced it all with broader, more generic language about the founding fathers and patriotism and American greatness. Can you believe this? The Trump administration literally went into a federally funded historic site and erased slavery because it didn't fit their narrative. And they did it right before President's Day. Like they wanted to celebrate Washington without acknowledging the enslaved people he owned. It's textbook whitewashing. It's rewriting history. And it's exactly the kind of authoritarian control over information that we're supposed to be afraid of in other countries. But here's where it gets good. Local officials and civil rights groups immediately sued. They said, this is illegal. You can't just erase historical fact from a public exhibit because it's politically inconvenient. And a federal judge agreed. Immediately agreed. The judge issued an emergency injunction ordering Trump's administration to restore the full exhibit right now, not in a few weeks, not after an appeal, now. The judge didn't hold back in the written order. The judge said Trump's changes appeared aimed at minimizing or omitting the role of slavery in the nation's founding, and then dropped this line. The federal government may not use its control over public spaces to sanitize or falsify historical fact. That's a judge calling out the Trump administration for lying, for trying to rewrite history, for using federal power to push propaganda instead of truth. This is huge because it's not just about one exhibit in Philadelphia. This is about Trump's entire approach to controlling narratives about America's past. He's been pushing what he calls patriotic education. He wants schools to teach that America is exceptional, that our founders were heroes, that our history is something to be proud of without qualification, and to do that, he needs to downplay or erase the ugly parts, like slavery, like genocide of Native Americans, like all the contradictions and crimes that are part of our real history, and judges are saying, no, you don't get to do that. You don't get to use federal power to force a sanitized version of history on the public. You don't get to erase slavery from exhibits because it makes people uncomfortable. The truth matters, facts matter, and courts are going to enforce that even when it goes against what Trump wants. This is the latest in a pattern we've been seeing. Federal judges blocking Trump's immigration orders. Federal judges threatening contempt over ICE defying release orders. Federal judges restoring voting rights Trump tried to restrict. And now federal judges forcing Trump to restore slavery exhibits his administration tried to erase. Over and over, the courts are stepping in to stop Trump from going too far. And Trump has got to be furious about it. Because here's the thing. Trump thought he could control the narrative. He thought he could use federal agencies to shape how Americans think about history, about race, about America itself. And judges keep reminding him that no, you can't do that. We have constitutional protections. We have judicial review. We have courts that will block you when you try to abuse power. And no matter how many Supreme Court justices Trump appointed, lower court judges are still willing to stand up to him. This Philadelphia case is perfect because it's so clear-cut. Trump's team removed factual historical information about slavery and replaced it with propaganda, and a judge said, "That's illegal. Restore it immediately." There's no ambiguity here, no complicated legal theory, just a straightforward ruling that the government cannot falsify history at publicly funded sites. And Trump lost, badly and immediately. What they removed was specific. The displays about Washington's 9 enslaved workers, the panels describing who they were, the information about how some escaped to freedom, including a woman named Ona Judge who fled and was never recaptured despite Washington's attempts to get her back. All of that was taken down. And what replaced it? Broader language about the Founding Fathers, more generic patriotic messaging. Stuff that made Washington look like a pure hero without acknowledging the enslaved people he owned. And the timing was deliberate too. They made these changes right before President's Day, like they wanted to celebrate Washington without the messy reality of slavery getting in the way. It was a calculated move to shape public perception during a moment of national celebration, and they thought no one would stop them. But local officials noticed immediately. Philadelphia City Council members, community historians, civil rights groups. They saw what happened and they were furious. Because this wasn't just about one exhibit. This was about the federal government coming into their city and erasing Black history from a public space. This was about Trump's administration deciding that slavery is too uncomfortable to talk about. So let's just pretend it wasn't as bad as it was. So they sued. And they moved fast. They filed for an emergency injunction arguing that the changes were illegal, that they violated the public trust, that the federal government doesn't have the right to falsify history at publicly funded sites. and they got a federal judge to agree almost immediately. The judge's order was scathing. Didn't just say restore the exhibit. Said what Trump's administration did appeared aimed at minimizing or omitting the role of slavery in the nation's founding. That's a judge calling out the administration for intentionally trying to rewrite history. And then the judge said, the federal government may not use its control over public spaces to sanitize or falsify historical fact. That's a direct rebuke. That's the court saying, you don't get to do propaganda at federal historic sites. And the order was immediate. No waiting, no appeals process. Restore the exhibit now, and not just restore it. The judge also ordered that Trump's administration has to consult with community historians before making any future changes. That's the court imposing oversight. That's the judge saying, we don't trust you to handle this properly on your own, so you need to work with actual experts who care about historical accuracy. This is huge legally because it establishes that there are limits to what the federal government can do with historic sites. They can't just decide to erase inconvenient truths. They can't just remove displays about slavery because it doesn't fit their preferred narrative. Courts will intervene. And they'll intervene immediately. But it's also huge politically because this is Trump getting slapped down by a federal judge in a way that's easy for everyone to understand. It's not complicated constitutional law. It's not arcane legal theory. It's simple. Trump tried to erase slavery from an exhibit. A judge said, you can't do that. Restore it. That's a narrative anyone can follow, and it makes Trump look bad in a very specific way. Because who tries to erase slavery from history? Who looks at an exhibit about enslaved people and thinks, no, we should take that down and replace it with something more patriotic? That's not normal. That's not defensible. And it plays right into accusations that Trump's administration is racist, that he's trying to whitewash American history, that he's more interested in propaganda than truth. And it's happening at a moment when Trump is already under fire for how his administration handles race issues. His immigration crackdown is being compared to fascism. His ICE agents are killing Americans. His attorney general is being accused of covering up Epstein connections. And now his Interior Department is literally erasing slavery from historic sites. It all adds up to a pattern of an administration that doesn't care about truth, doesn't care about rights, and will use federal power to impose its worldview on everyone else. The Black community is watching this. Civil rights groups are watching this. Educators are watching this. And they're seeing exactly what Trump values. He values a sanitized version of American history that makes white Americans feel good about their country without having to grapple with the reality of slavery, racism, and ongoing inequality. He wants patriotic propaganda, not honest education. And he's willing to use federal agencies to enforce that vision. But here's what Trump didn't count on. Federal judges who still care about the rule of law, who still believe the government can't just lie to the public, who still think historical truth matters more than political narratives. And this judge in Pennsylvania is one of them. The judge saw what Trump's team did, recognized it as falsification of history, and blocked it immediately. And that immediate action is important. Because if the judge had taken weeks or months to rule, the exhibit might have stayed changed through President's Day, through Black History Month, through months of tourists seeing the sanitized version. But the judge moved fast, recognized the emergency, and forced Trump to restore the truth right away. Now Trump has to decide how to respond. Does he comply? Does he appeal? Does he attack the judge? Because none of those options are good. If he complies, he looks weak. He looks like he got caught trying to erase slavery and had to back down. If he appeals, he has to argue in court that the federal government should be allowed to falsify history. That's not a winning argument. And if he attacks the judge, he looks like he's defending the erasure of slavery, which is political poison. So Trump is stuck, and the exhibit is being restored. And the whole country just watched a federal judge tell the president that no, you cannot rewrite history to suit your political agenda. The truth matters. Slavery happened. It's part of our founding story, and courts will protect that truth even when it's uncomfortable for you.